This is Ovid's Metamorphoses, translated into English by Alan Mandelbaum. Book 14. And Glaucus, the Euboean god who haunts the swollen surge, swam hard, he never paused, past Aetna, heaped upon the giant's jaws, and past the Cyclops fields, which know no plough or harrow, and are rich and fertile, though they never see yoked cattle. Then he raced past Rhegium and Messina, towns that face each other as they flank those narrow straits that swallow passing ships and separate Ausonia and Sicily. Now he, with stalwart strokes, cleaves the Tyrrhenian sea and reaches green hillsides and Circe's halls, her palace full of phantom animals. As soon as he's seen Circe, after she and he have given and received their greetings, he says, "O goddess, may you pity me, a god? You are indeed the only one who can, if I am worthy of your care, give me the remedy for love's despair. O daughter of the sun, I know as well as anyone the power herbs possess, for I was changed by them. But now you'll hear the cause of my wild frenzy. On the coast of Italy, where it lies opposite Messina's walls, I first caught sight of Scylla. I won't repeat to you, I'm too ashamed. My pleas and promises, my flattery, my words, they all were treated scornfully. But now, if magic chance have any force, do let your sacred lips entrance her heart. Or if the better way is herbs, I pray, do choose an herb whose power has been proved. Don't cure my longing, do not heal my wound." And Circe is familiar with such flames. No one, in matters of the heart, falls prey more easily than Circe, whether she is in herself the cause of this, or else must suffer the revenge of Venus for the time when Circe's father was informer, the one who spied on Venus and her lover. And so she did not hesitate to answer, "Will you do much better seeking one who shares your loves, your hopes, one flame that warms you both? One such as you should have no need to plead, for you yourself deserve to be beseeched, and if you would concede to me the least of hopes, believe me, I'll indeed implore, and to dispel your doubts, your lack of trust in your own form and its compelling force, I cite myself as proof. Although I am a goddess, daughter of the splendid sun, and have the power to enchant with song and to entrance with potent herbs, I long to be your own. It's you I want. Save scorn for one who scorns you, and requite with love the flame of one who wants you. So, at once, two women can receive what they deserve." And so Circe tempted him. But Glaucus said, "Green foliage will blossom in the sea, and seaweed sprout upon the highest peaks, before my love for Scylla suffers change, as long as she's alive." And now, enraged, the goddess, since she cannot strike the god himself, and loving him would hardly want to hurt him, turns her rage against the girl whom he preferred. Offended and repulsed, straightway she pounds and minces noxious herbs, whose juices are horrific. As she mixes those potions, she intones infernal chants. the spells of Hecate. Then she puts on an azure cloak and makes her way among a crowd of fawning beasts. She leaves her halls and heads for Rhegium, which lies across the narrows from Messina's rugged rocks. She treads the surface of the churning sea as if she were on solid ground. Dry-shod, she reaches Rhegium. There was a cove, a little inlet shaped like a bent bow, a quiet place where Scylla, at midday, sought shelter when the sea and sky were hot, and in mid-course the sun scorched with full force, reducing shadows to a narrow thread. And Circe now contaminates this bay, polluting it with noxious poisons. There she scatters venom, drawn from dreadful roots, and 3 times, 9 times, murmurs, an obscure and tangled maze of words, a labyrinth, the magic chant that issues from her lips. Then Scylla comes. No sooner has she plunged waist deep into the water than she sees, around her hips, the horrid, barking shapes. At first, not able to believe that these are part of her own body, Scylla flees. Afraid, she tries to chase off these loud dogs. But what she flees, she carries with herself. And as she probes her thighs, her shins, her feet, she finds just gaping dogs in place of these, the sort of hounds that Cerberus might keep. Below, her body's made of these mad dogs, for at her loins her belly is cut short. She stands upon the backs of beastly forms. And Glaucus, for the love of Scylla, wept. He fled from Circe now. He shunned the bed of one whose herbs had been so harsh, so heartless. But Scylla stayed, fixed in her place, and when at last she had a chance to take revenge on Circe, she snatched up Ulysses' men. She also would have swallowed all the ships in which Aeneas crossed the Narrows if, before his coming, she had not been changed into a rock. That stands there to this day. But even as a rock along those straits, she still leaves passing mariners afraid. And when, by force of oars, the Trojan ships had safely passed both Scylla and Charybdis, voracious vortex, and had almost reached the shoreline of Ausonia, the wind drove them far back onto the Libyan coast, and there the woman who had come from Sidon welcomed Aeneas, offering the Trojan her heart and home. But then she could not bear Aeneas's leaving her, and on a pyre that she'd prepared by using as pretext a sacred rite, she fell upon her sword. Herself deceived, she then deceived them all. When he had left behind those new-built walls of Carthage, founded on a sandy shore, Aeneas visited again the land of Eryx and hospitable Acestes, and offered there a sacrifice to honor his father's tomb. And then the Trojans boarded the boats that Iris, Juno's messenger, had almost burned. They passed the island realm of Aeolus, and lands that smoked with fumes of sulphur, blazing hot, and past the rocks held by the Sirens, Achaeolus' daughters. Then, having lost his pilot Palinurus, Aeneas sailed along Inarime, and Procite, and rocky Pithecusae, the barren island that derives its name from its inhabitants, a pack of knaves. the vile Cercopes. For, in fact, one day, the father of the gods, out of his hate for people so dishonest, fruitless, base, transformed them into animals, but shaped their features so that they at once seemed both like men and unlike men. For the Cercopes were changed to Pitekoi, the Greek for monkeys. Jove gave them shorter limbs, and as old age will furrow faces, so he furrowed theirs. And having clothed their forms with yellow hair, he sent them off to dwell on that bare isle. But first he stripped them of the power of words, for perjury was all their tongues had served. The only thing he left them free to utter were harsh and hoarse complaints, their scrawny chatter. But after he had coasted past these isles, and, on his right, sailed past Parthenope, Aeneas, turning slightly westward, found the tomb of his melodious trumpeter Misenus, buried on the marshy ground of Cumae. There, on entering her grotto, the Trojan pleaded with the long-lived Sibyl to let him cross Avernus and encounter his father's shame. The prophetess held fast her eyes upon the ground, but then at last the Sibyl, God-inspired, wild-possessed, consented.
You whose feats are so immense, who, in the clash of weapons, showed such strength, and in the raging fire such reverence. It is an awesome thing you seek, and yet, oh, Trojans, do not fear what you have sought. You are to get. With me as guide, you'll see Elysium and the third realm of the world, and see the dear shade of your father, too. There is no path that is denied to virtue.
Such were her words. And then she showed Aeneas, within the forest of Persephone, Avernus's queen, a gleaming golden bough. She ordered him to pluck it from the tree. And having plucked the golden bough, Aeneas was shown the massive structures of Avernus. And there he met his own ancestors and magnanimous Anchises' aged shade. There, too, he came to know the laws and norms that rule the world below, and also learned what dangers he would face in wars to come. As through the dusk and darkness he climbed back to ease his weary steps on that hard path, Aeneas talked to his Cumaean guide. Although I do not know if you're indeed a goddess, or simply one most dear unto the gods, for me you'll always be a deity. And I shall always be most grateful, for you have permitted me descent to death's domain, and once I've seen death's self, you granted me a safe return. In recompense, when I am back again beneath the open sky, I shall erect a shrine for you and offer fragrant incense. Then, turning back to him, the prophetess sighed deeply and replied,
I am no goddess. Mere mortals do not merit sacred incense. Don't let your ignorance lead you awry. Know this! I could have had eternal light, have lived forever, had I sacrificed virginity, accepting Phoebus' love. Such was his hope, and trying to corrupt my modesty with gifts, he said,
Now, just express your wish, and that Cumaean virgin will be the gift I give.
I gathered up a little heap of dust, and holding that, I asked that I be granted years to match the number of those grains. But I forgot to ask that I stay young through all that span. I was a fool, yet even then he would have given me that too, unending you, if I had yielded to him, but I did not. I scorned him, and I am a virgin still. But now life's time of joy is in retreat. Old age with tottering steps is on its way towards me. For many years I'll bear that weight. In fact, it is some 7 centuries that I have lived already, and to match those grains of dust, it is 300 harvests and just as many vintages that I must see. The day will come when this long life will leave me shriveled, worn away by age. My limbs will shrink to trifles. No one then will dream that I've been loved and pleased to God. And even Phoebus may not recognize the Sibyl then. He even may deny that he had ever loved me. And my life will end. So frail, so scant, I shall become invisible, and through my voice alone shall I be known. That's all that fate will grant.
These were the things that Sibyl told Aeneas as they climbed upward from the depths of Styx, emerging close to Cumae. And the Trojan, after the proper rites of sacrifice, sailed to the shore that had not yet received its name, Caeta, after his old nurse. It's on this shore that after long, hard trials, the weary Machaerus of Neritus, a comrade of industrious Ulysses, had stopped. The sight of Achaemenides, alive and sound, amazed him. Long ago, Ulysses's men had left behind their friend, abandoned him on rocky Aetna when they fled the Cyclops. And he asked, "What chance or god has saved you, Achaemenides? And how can you, a Greek, have journeyed here upon a Trojan boat? Where is it bound?" And Achaemenides, no longer dressed in savage, shaggy fashion, in poor rags that thorns helped pin together, he was back to his own self, replied, "I swear this ship is dearer to me than are Ithaca and my own home, and I respect Aeneas as much as I revere my father. If I lie, may I be doomed to see once more foul Polyphemus and the human gore that drips down from his jaws. Oh, I never can, however much I try, repay the debt I owe Aeneas. How can I forget that if I speak and breathe and see the sky and flashing sun, it is because of him. Aeneas kept my soul from ending in the Cyclops' mouth. And even if I should now leave behind the light of life, I shall be buried in a tomb, not in the guts of Polyphemus. Oh, what fear took my heart, if I in panic had still any soul or senses left, when I saw you sail off across the deep, deserting me. I would have shouted, but I was afraid my cries might let the blind Cyclops discover me. Indeed, Ulysses' clamor almost wrecked the ship on which you left. I saw it all. I saw the Cyclops tear a giant rock off from the mountainside. I saw him toss that rock into the sea. Oh, he did not stop. His massive arm kept flinging those great rocks as from a catapult, and I forgot that I was not aboard. I feared those stones would stir a wave or wind in force enough to sink your ship. And when at last you fled and sailing off escaped atrocious death, the groaning Cyclops prowled the slopes of Aetna. Well, he groped among the woods, and since he could not see, he often struck against sharp rocks, and stretching out his bleeding arms, he cursed the race of Greeks and howled,
"Oh, would that chance might bring Ulysses or one of his men, so I could vent my wrath, could eat his guts, and tear his living flesh with these bare hands, and inundate my gullet with his blood, and feel his mangled members shuddering between my teeth. For then how slight a thing, indeed no thing at all, would blindness be."
Well, he shouted this, and more, ferociously. And livid horror filled me as I watched his face still smeared with slaughter, his fierce hands, the empty socket of his eye, his limbs, and beard encrusted with the blood of men. Its death I had before my eyes, and yet it was the least of all my fears, I thought. He'll grab me now, and he will stuff his guts with mine. With my mind, I still could see that scene when he snatched 2 of my dear friends and dashed them 3 and then 4 times against the ground. Like a shaggy lion, he crouched over my comrades, bent on stuffing down their flesh, white-marrowed bones, their innards, and their limbs still warm. And terror took my soul. I paled with horror as I watched him crunch and spit out bleeding fare, and vomit chunks of flesh mixed in with wine. Oh, such was the fate I pictured for my sorry self. For days on end I hid. At every sound I quaked. I was afraid of death, but longed for it. Alone and helpless, desperate, I ate acorns and leaves and grass. I held at bay starvation. Oh, there was nothing to await but suffering and death until, well, at length, I saw this ship far off, and so I begged with signs and gestures to be led away. I hurried to the beach, and they took pity on me. That Trojan ship received a Greek. I've told my tale, dear friend. Now tell me all the trials you faced, the perils that befell your chief Ulysses, and the company that sailed away with you across the sea. Then Macraeus told how, from Cyclops' coast, they reached the isle of Aeolus, the king whose realm is ringed by the Tyrrhenian. And there the son of Hippotes imprisons the winds within a bull's hide sack, and this Ulysses got, a memorable gift. That visit done, Ulysses' men sailed on 9 days, spurred by the breeze that blew astern. And now they had in sight the shore they sought, their Ithaca. But when the 10th day dawned, Ulysses' men with greed and envy thought that sack held gold. And they unloosed the ties that held it fast. The winds unleashed a blast that drove Ulysses and his crewmen back along the very sea they had just crossed into the port of tyrant Aeolus. From there, continued Macraeus, we reached the city of the Laestrygonians, the walls that Lamus founded long ago. Antiphates was ruler of that land. Ulysses sent me on, together with 2 other men, in embassy to him. But I and one of them were only saved from his ferocity by flight. The third, a victim, stained with blood the profane jaws of King Antiphates. Well, we rushed away, and he pursued us with a vast array of force. A mob threw rocks at us. They sank our men. They sank our fleet. And just one ship escaped their fatal rage, the boat on which Ulysses and I, too, sailed off. We mourned our dreadful losses, and we landed on the isle that you see there. It lies far off, and it is best to sight it from afar and not close up, believe me, I was there. And you, Aeneas, you who are most just of all the Trojans, you, a goddess's son, now that the war is finished, I've no cause to call you enemy. Pay me close heed. Do not land there, it is the home of Circe. Well, we too, when we had landed on those sands, recalled Antiphates and cruel Cyclops. We did not want to enter unknown houses. And we cast lots, and chance chose me and trusty Polytace and Eurylochus and one who guzzled wine too frequently, Elpenor, together with still others, twice 9 more. Well, it's we who were first to visit Circe's halls. We reached her home. We waited at the door. 1,000 wolves came forward in that throng. She-bears and lionesses mingled too. Well, that frightened all of us, and yet, in truth, there was no need for panic. Not one beast was bent on injury. Instead, they wagged their tails and followed us quite festively, filing along and fawning, welcoming, until attendant maidens came to greet and lead us through the marble halls to meet their mistress. Oh, Circe's room was splendid. She sat on a solemn throne in gleaming robes, and over these she'd thrown a cloak of gold. Fair nymphs and nereids formed the company of her attendants, and they card no fleece with agile fingers, they spin no wool threads. Instead, they're charged with sorting out her plants. From jumbled heaps of flowers, a motley mass of vari-colored herbs, they must select and separate each kind in its own basket. And she herself controls the work they do. She knows how every leaf is to be used, how they can be combined. She is alert to just what dose will serve. On seeing us, when greetings had been given and received, her face relaxed. Oh, we never could have wished for warmer welcome. And at once she asked her nymphs to serve us a sweet brew, a mix of roasted barley, honey, curdled milk, and pure wine. And in secret Circe slipped her juices into it. They'd never be detected in a drink so honey-sweet. And we accepted what we got from Circe, from the right hand of such a deity. As soon as we had drunk, for we were thirsty, our lips were parched, the fatal goddess touched the hair atop our heads with her charmed wand, and then, despite my shame, I tell you this, I started to grow bristles, rough and stiff. I lost the power of speech. I could emit no words. All I could utter were harsh grunts. I bent. My face was turned down to the ground, and it had hardened into a rough snout. I felt the muscles of my neck swell out, and with the limbs that only now had held the cup, I now left tracks along the floor. Then I, together with the other men, such was the power that her potions had, was shut within a pig-pen. Only one of us, Eurylochus, had not touched the offered cup, had not been made a hog. And if he'd not escaped our fate, I'd still be part of that pig herd, a swine with bristles. For then Ulysses never would have learned of that disaster from Eurylochus, and come to Circe's palace, freeing us. For Hermes, god who brings tranquility, gave a white flower to Ulysses, moly, the name that gods have given to that plant, grows from a black root. And with that in hand, together with the counsels Hermes gave, Ulysses felt secure, forewarned. He came to Circe's halls. When the insidious cup was offered to him, and with her charmed wand she tried to touch his hair, Ulysses spurned the goddess. He unsheathed his sword, and she was terrified by that, and so she beat retreat. And then the two of them pledged peace, and clasped right hands, abjuring trickery. And having been received into her bed as husband, he asked this as wedding gift, the bodies of his men as they had been. She sprinkled other juices over us, juices that she had drawn from some strange herb. This time they were benevolent. She struck our heads with her charmed wand, which she reversed, and then she chanted words that were opposed to those that served her as a spell before. And as the goddess chanted, we grew more and more erect. We stood up from the ground. Our bristles fell from us. Our forked feet lost their cleft. We got our shoulders back. Our arms were ours again, and once again prolonged with forearms. And Ulysses wept, and we, embracing him, wept too. We flung ourselves around the neck of our dear chief. The first words that we spoke were words of gratitude. For 1 whole year we stayed in Circe's land, and I saw much indeed in that long span, and heard of many things in tale and story. And there's one tale that I heard privately from one of Circe's 4 attendant nymphs, who helped her, as I said, by sorting herbs for sacred spells. In fact, while Circe spent her time alone with him, our chief Ulysses, that nymph showed me within a sanctuary a snow-white marble statue wreathed with garlands. It was the effigy of a young man, and, on his head, the form of a woodpecker. And I, of course, was curious. I asked whose effigy it was, and why he had been honored with a shrine, and why his head bore that carved bird. And in reply she said, "Just listen, Macareus, and understand what power my mistress has at her command. This tale has much to teach. Pay careful heed. Picus, the son of Saturn, once was king of Latium, and he was famous for his love of horses that were fit for war. His form you now see there in effigy, and you yourself can judge his manly beauty. The image sports and points to reality. His spirit matched his body, although he was not yet old enough to have seen 4 quinquennial Olympiads at Elis. His face had fascinated all the dryads who lived among the hills of Latium. The goddesses of fountains sighed for him, as did the naiads of the Albula and those of Numicius and the Anio. The Almo with its short course, and the Nar, the stream that's so impulsive, and the Farfar with its dark flow, and those who make their home in Taurian Diana's wooded realm and in the lake that lies nearby. But he spurned all of these. He courted only one, the nymph who, so the story goes, was born of honest Janus's wife Vanilia upon the Palatine. And when her time for marriage came, the man whom she most prized of all the suitors was the Laurentine Picus, and so the nymph became his bride. Her beauty was most rare, but rarer still her artistry and song, and for that song they called her Canens. With her song she used to move the woods, the stones. On hearing her, wild beasts grew meek. Long rivers stayed their flow to listen. Wandering birds would halt their course. One day, as with that womanly sweet voice she sang, her husband Picus left to hunt wild boars across the Latin fields. His mount was an impulsive stallion. Picus bore 2 javelins in his left hand, and wore a purple cloak that, at the top, was closed by a gold brooch. And Circe, too, had come to those same woods. The daughter of the sun had climbed up from the fields that now are called Circean after her. Those fertile slopes were richer hunting grounds for some new herbs. And there the goddess, from behind a bush, caught sight of the young man, and she was struck. In her dismay, the herbs that she had plucked fell from her hands, and through her marrow ran fierce flames. As soon as she could once again to lay claim to sense and reason, she was just about to tell him of her passion, but his speeding horse and all the hunting bands surrounding Picus took away her chance. At that she cried, "But he will not escape, not even if the wind bears him away. If I'm indeed the one I know I am, if there's some force my herbs can still command, and I can count upon my spells and chance." Well, that said, the goddess fashioned a feigned form. She sent the phantom body of a boar across Prince Picus's path before his eyes. A boar that, seeking cover, seemed to hide within a wood so thick with trunks and leaves that any horse was barred from entering. And Picus, unaware of her deceit, without delay pursued that phantom prey, and leaping swiftly from his foaming horse, on foot he ventured deep into the woods. He hunts for what may seem but cannot be. And seeing this, the goddess called upon infernal sorcery, her chants and charms, invoking obscure gods with a strange spell, a spell that Circe used when she would veil the face of the white moon or hide the sun, her Titan father, with a rain-rich cloud. And this time, too, as Circe sings that spell, the sky grows dark, mist rises from the soil. Astray along blind paths his men are lost, and Picus, left alone, has no escort. And Circe, when the time and place are right, cries out to Picus, "Oh, by your fair eyes that have made captive mine, and by your grace, for you are fair indeed, compelling me, though I'm a deity, to beg and plead, requite my love, and welcome as your own father-in-law, the one whose eyes see all, the sun. Don't scorn the daughter of a Titan." But ruthless, he scorned her, and her entreaties.
"Well, I am not yours, whoever you may be. Another holds me in captivity. I only hope that heaven lets me stay her slave until I reach a ripe old age. As long as destiny allots to me, my Canens, Janus's daughter, I'll not breach the faith I pledged to her when we were wed."
And after she beseeched again in vain, Circe exclaimed, "But you will pay, you won't return to Canens any more. The wounds a woman can inflict when she is hurt by one she loves, you now will feel, in fact, for Circe is in love, and she is hurt, and she's a woman." Well, to the west she turned 2 times, and 2 times to the east. 3 times she touched the young man with her wand, 3 times she chanted charms, and Picus turned and raced away, but was amazed to find he was more swift than he had ever been. He saw that wings were sprouting from his body, and then enraged to see that, suddenly, he had been changed into a strange new bird within the woods of Latium. He pecked with his hard beak at the wild oaks. His blows, his wrath, inflicted wounds on the long boughs. His wings took on the hue of his red cloak. The gold that just before had been a brooch that bit into his clothes was changed to feathers. The band that ringed his neck was yellow gold. Nothing was left to him of his old self except his name, that Picus did retain. Meanwhile, the friends of Picus with hoarse cries kept calling for him through the countryside, but could not find him. They got no reply. The one they found was Circe. It was she who had in fact thinned out the mist by now. They accused her of the crime. They claimed the right to have their ruler back again. They readied an attack with deadly shafts, but Circe sprinkled Picus's men with venom and her insidious juices, and she called a night and all the gods of night to come from Erebus and Chaos. Wailing long, she summoned Hecate, and in response the forests, oh, this is unbelievable, leapt from their place within the ground. The soil groaned, and the trees that stood nearby grew pale, and on the pastures where her poisons fell, the grass was stained with drops of blood. The stones seemed to emit hoarse moans, and all the hounds were barking. Dark snakes swarmed across the ground. One saw the thin shades of the silent dead flitting about. Astounded, that great crowd, the men of Picus, trembled. Then the goddess touched their dazed faces with her awesome wand, and they were changed to beasts of every sort, a wondrous change. Not one retained his form. Well, by now the setting sun has spread its rays across Tartessus' shores, and Canens waits in vain. Her eyes, her heart are watching for her husband, and by torchlight all her slaves, her people, comb the woods and search each glade. And though she weeps and tears her hair and beats her breast, all this, it's not enough. The nymph runs out. Across the field she wanders, wild. 6 nights and just as many dawns have seen poor Canens as she wanders without sleep or food across the valleys and the peaks. The Tiber sees her last. On its long banks the nymph, worn out with grief, and her hard path collapses. There, together with her tears, she pours out words of sorrow, muffled, faint, and yet melodious, just as the swan, while dying, sings a mournful final song. At last, consumed by her despair, her flesh wasted to thinnest marrow, she dissolves and slowly vanishes into thin air. And yet that place preserves her memory. In honor of the name the nymph had borne, the Muses called it Canens, rightfully. And there were many things of just that sort I heard about or saw in those long months. Our idleness had left us sluggish, weak. And now Ulysses ordered us to sea. Again we were to spread our sails, and Circe, before we left, warned us how treacherous our paths might be, how vast the ocean was, and what dangers await along the savage sea. Her words, I must confess, filled me with fright, and when we reached this beach, I stayed behind. The tale that Machaerus had told was done. Then this brief epitaph was carved upon the tomb in which they placed the marble urn that held the ashes of Aeneas's nurse. Here I, Caeta, lie, the pious one, whom I had nurtured as a son, snatched me from the Grecian flames, and, fittingly, along this shore cremated me. And now the Trojans free their hawsers, leave behind the grassy coast. At sea they keep their distance from the Isle of Treachery, the home of awesome Circe. And they head for that point where, amid the woods and mist, the Tiber's waters pour their yellow silt into the sea. Aeneas is received by Faunus' son Latinus, and he takes as wife Lavinia, Latinus' daughter, but not without pitched battles. He must face tenacious tribes, for Turnus, in his rage, Lavinia had been his promised bride, fights furiously. All Etruria pours into Latium to join a war that's long and rough, with victory hard sought. Each side seeks allies to augment its force, while many offer Turnus their support. The Trojan camp can count on other cohorts. Aeneas asks Evander for his help, and not in vain. But Venulus, who went to Diomedes' city, gains no aid at all from that Aetolian immigrant. In Daunus' time, the hero Diomedes came to Iapygia, founded a great city, and, wedding Daunus' daughter, got as dowry the region he now ruled. But he refused all help to Venulus, the emissary of Turnus, and he offered this excuse. He did not wish to place the men of Daunus at risk, and few of his own men were left, too few to form a well-armed corps for Turnus. Recounting how his ranks had been reduced, he told in full this melancholy truth. "Oh, lest you think I'm lying, well, listen now to this. For though remembering a sorrow renews its bitterness, I will try as best I can to tell my trials. When Ilium was burned, and Pergama had fed the flames the Danaans set, Oileus' son had snatched the virgin from the virgin goddess's altar. And though, when Ajax raped Cassandra, he alone deserved to pay the penalty, Minerva's rage struck each and every Greek. And we were scattered by the goddess, made to suffer lightning bolts and angry waves, thrust into darkness, swamped by hurricanes, the wrath of sky and sea, and the immense catastrophe of Cape Caphareus. Well, I won't keep you now to hear all our miseries told one by one. I'll only say of Greece that it could even have made Priam weep. Yes, I was able to escape the waves thanks to the aid of warrior Minerva, but once again I had to leave my land. This time the fertile Venus made me pay for an old wound that I had given her, a wound she still remembered. So, in sum, I offered such great grief on the high seas, and in my wars on land such miseries, that I would often deem most happy those the deadly tempest drowned at Cape Caphareus. My men had borne the worst that wars and waves can offer. They gave way to weariness. They longed to see the last of voyages, and Acmon, born to fume and flare by nature, was filled with still more spleen by these disasters. He cried,
"But is there anything at all that you, my friends, cannot withstand? If Venus should seek to heap still greater woes on us, can she outdo what she's already done? As long as one fears even greater hurt is yet to come, he's vulnerable, but when fate already has unleashed the worst, then dread can be dismissed. When our ill luck is at its height, despair can be packed off. Though Venus did hear my words and show her hate for all of Diomedes' men, no matter. To scorn her hate is our best shield against her."
Well, the bitter words of Acmon only served to anger Venus, to revive her hurt. But few among my faithful crew approved of his abrasive speech. Far more reproach our comrade. But when he attempts to speak, his voice, together with its road, his throat, thins out. What was his hair is feathers now, and on his new-shaped neck the feathers sprout, as on his chest and back, and his forearms show longer plumage, and his elbows curve into long wings. A web grows on his feet, a web that now englobes his toes. His mouth grows stiff and horny, lengthens to a point. And Lycas, as he watches Acmon altered so mystifyingly, is struck with terror. And so are Idas, Nycteus, and Rhexenor, and Abas. And as they stare, they too take on the very form of Acmon. Almost all my crew became a flying flock. They flutter around the oars. And should you ask what sort of birds these were, so suddenly transformed, they were not swans, and yet they were in kind much like the snow-white swans. Now you know why I, the Iapygian Daunus' son-in-law, find it so hard to make this city prosper. The countryside is parched, and I am left with almost none of my most trusted men. So Diomedes said, and when he left that region, Venulus went past the bay of the Pelketians, and then the lands of the Messapians, in which he saw, hid in a great and shadowed forest, caves concealed by supple, slender reeds that swayed. The half-goat Pan has made that place his home. But long ago it was the dwelling place of nymphs. But they had taken flight, afraid of an Apulian shepherd. In dismay, he'd burst upon them suddenly. They ran away, but soon with their good sense regained, they saw who'd chased them off, and taunting him, they danced with agile feet a choral dance. The shepherd mocked them, and in mime he pranced with loutish steps, and added insults, spat obscenities. His blabber did not stop until the tree bark cloaking him climbed up around his neck. He's now a tree, in fact. And from the juice and fruit one can divine the nature of that shepherd. As a sign of what he was, his tongue has left its mark. The fruit of the wild olive tree is harsh. The berries bear the trace of his rude words. On Venulus's return, when Turnus learned that Diomedes would not help their cause, even without those added forces, he and his Rutulians did not relent, and on both warring sides much blood was shed. With avid torches Turnus struck against the Trojans' pine-framed ships. The waves have spared those hulls, but now they faced a flaming threat, a fire that fed on resin, fed on pitch, and any other thing that nourished it. It even climbed the towering masts, attacked the sails, and from the curving hulls, cross planks, smoke rose. But then Sibyl called to mind that all this timber came from her own pines, and so the sacred mother of the gods, with brazen cymbals, clanging loud and harsh, and with her brash and blatant boxwood flutes, filled all the sky. Drawn through the light air by her team of harnessed lions, she outcried, "O Turnus, with your sacrilegious hands you fling in vain those torches. I shall save these ships. I'll not permit the greedy flames to burn these pines, these parts, these very limbs of my own forests." And as the goddess spoke, the thunder roared. Its boom announced a downpour of rain and leaping hail. The brother winds, Astraeus' sons, assailed the sky and burst upon the waves and warred amongst themselves. A gust from one of those three winds now helped the nurturing mother goddess, and she snapped the hempen hawsers that had held hard fast the Phrygian fleet. The ships were free. Sibyl now tilted them head down into the sea. The wood at once grew soft, turned into flesh. The curving prows were transformed into heads. The oars were changed to toes and swimming legs, the flanking timbers into living sides. The keels which lined the ships midway were spines. The ropes became soft hair. The sail yards changed to arms. The color of the ships remained, transformed to naiads. They are still sea green. Those ships were born on rugged mountain tops, but now as water nymphs, with young girls' joy, they sport among the waves they used to fear. But in soft waters, none among the throng of nymphs bears traces of her origins. And yet, recalling perils undergone in savage storms at sea, they often help with their unsupporting hands all ships at risk of sinking, that is, all ships but Grecian ships. In fact, remembering the ruin wrought at Troy, they hate the Greeks, and they were glad to see Ulysses' ships with shattered planks, and see the vessel of Achaemenides grown stiff as all its timbers turned to stone. After the ships were changed to living nymphs, there was some hope that the Vertulians, awed by that prodigy, would stop at last. But they fought on. Each side could count upon its gods, and just as good as gods, its courage. By now it's not the dowry of a kingdom, and not the scepter of a father-in-law, nor even you, virgin Lavinia, that spurs them. It is simply victory. For shame of giving up, they will not stop. But Venus finally could see her son triumphant. Turnus fell, so did the town of Ardea. While Turnus was alive, its power won much fame. But when the flames of foreigners had razed it, what remained was nothing but warm ashes. Yet from that debris a bird flew up, one never seen before. It beat the ashes with its wings. Its sound, its scrawny frame, its ashen hue, all these seemed suited to a ruinous town. And so that bird still bears the city's name. The heron is an Ardeae bird. Its beating wings are Ardea in mourning. By now Aeneas's piety and prowess moved all the gods, and even Juno's self, to set aside their ancient spleen and spite. Iulus had grown up. His destiny was well secured, and now the time had come for heaven to receive the valiant son of Cytherea. Venus had beseeched the other gods' approval. Lovingly, her arms around her father's neck, the goddess asked this: "You never have been harsh with me, dear father, and I have need your kindness now, as does my Aeneas. He is of my blood, and you are his grandfather. Oh, may you then, in all your magnanimity, grant him some portion of divinity, a place, however small, in heaven. He has seen the frightful kingdom of the dead. He crossed the Stygian streams, and once is quite enough." And all the gods agreed. Even the queen, Jove's wife, did not look on impassively. She too consented peacefully. Jove said, Both you who pray and he whose cause you plead deserves this gift from heaven. It is yours!" Such were his words, and Venus thanked her father. Then, drawn through the light air by harnessed doves, she went to the Laurentian shore, just where, concealed by reeds, Numicius's winding stream pours its fresh waters out into the sea. She asked the river god to wash away and carry off, along his silent course, into the sea's abyss, all the mortal parts of her Aeneas. And the horned Numicius, obeying Venus, cleansed her son of his mortality. The purest part alone was left, and this, his sublimated body, she then anointed with ambrosia mixed with honeyed nectar, deifying him. A god the Roman people called Indiges, revered with altars and a sanctuary. And with his father gone, Ascanius, or Iulus, for he bore two names, became the king of Alba and the Latin realm. And next in line was Silvius, and then his son Latinus ruled, the one who bore both the name of his ancestor and his scepter. And he was followed by the famous Alba, and Epitus, his son, succeeded him. And next to rule were Capys and Capetus. And after them the king was Tiberinus, who gave his name to that same Tuscan stream in which he drowned. His sons were Romulus and the proud Acrotas. The older one was Romulus, who, trying to mime lightning, was struck down by a lightning bolt. His brother, a man who was more prudent, passed the scepter to sturdy Aventinus, who is buried on that same hill where once he reigned, the hill to which he gave his name. After his death, the people of the Palatine had Proca as ruler, and the story of Pomona took place in Proca's days. In Latium, no fair nymph had more skill and passion than Pomona in her love for gardens and for trees and plants that yield fine fruit. In truth, she owed her very name to that pursuit. She was not drawn to streams, not drawn to woods, but fields and branches bearing lovely fruit delighted her. That nymph did not hold fast a lance in her right hand. Instead, she gripped a curving pruning hook. It was with this that she trimmed leaves grown too luxurious, and cut back branches that were too entwined. With this she would incise the bark to graft sap from one plant onto another's branch, and she took care that no plant suffered thirst. She sprinkled water on the porous roots and tangled fibers. This was her sole task, her love. She did not long for carnal touch. Pomona feared the peasants' brutish ways, fenced off her orchards, and avoided men. She never let them in. And how hard they tried! Young satyrs with their dancing, leaping steps, and pans whose horns were garlanded with pines, and he whose years were more than what he showed, Silvanus, and Priapus, he whose scythes and penis are a sight that terrifies all thieves. They tried, but they did not succeed. Vertumnus was the one who loved her most, but like the rest, he too met brusque repulse. How often did that god disguise himself, and, as a sturdy reaper, bring her gifts of barley ears in baskets, and in fact, his camouflage was perfect. He would wrap fresh hay around his brow, one would have said that he'd just have come from turning new-mown grass. And other times he gripped a cattle prod in his rough hand, while you might well have sworn that he had just unyoked his weary oxen. With scythe in hand, he seemed to be a man who rakes the leaves and prunes the vines, and if he put a ladder on his back, well, he seemed about to gather apples. With a sword, he was a soldier. If he bore a rod, he was a fisherman. His masquerades were many. and by way of them he gained an entry to her orchards and a chance to see Pomona's haunting loveliness. One day, when he had clapped upon his head a grey wig and around his temples bound a motley wimple to disguise himself as an old woman leaning on a staff, he entered her fair orchard. When he had admired the fruit he saw, he told the nymph, "My, how skilled you are!" And that said, he kissed Pomona, as no true old woman would. And then, his body bent along the grass, he sat and gazed at that autumnal boughs, weighed down by fruit. In front of him there stood an elm whose boughs were artfully arrayed with gleaming grapes. And after he had praised the elm and its companion vine, he added, "Yea, but if that trunk stood there alone, unwed to that grapevine, in every way except for foliage it would seem worthless, and the vine that now embraces lovingly the tree to which it's mated, would lie flat, dispirited upon the ground. Oh, that plant has taught you nothing. You shun marriage, and desire no one. Oh, if you would welcome men, the crowd of suitors who would seek you then would far outnumber those who sought the hand of Helen. Oh, neither she who stirred the war between the Lapiths and the Centaurs, nor the wife of timid, some say the bold Ulysses, ever moved as many men as you, Pomona, could. For even now, although you shun and scorn all those who plead, you are the prize 1,000 young men seek, and half-gods, gods, and all those deities who haunt the Alban hills. Oh, but if you're wise, and would agree to a fine marriage, heed what this old woman, one who loves you more than all those others love you, and indeed more than you would believe, now says, reject those banal offers, and instead accept Vertumnus as the one to share your bed. Oh, I give you all the guarantees you want on his account, although he may well know himself. I know him just as well. No nomad stray, he will not wander off on some vagrant ways. He never fawns upon the highly placed, nor is he like those many suitors who, as soon as they catch sight of someone new, run off to her. Oh, I'm sure that you will be the first and final love that he will pursue, the one to whom lifelong he will be true. And add to this his other gifts. He's young, and nature has blessed him with a gracious form, and he is versatile. He can take on all shapes and manes. Ask him to become whatever form you want, and it is done. And too, your tastes show similarities. You tend your fruit with love, but is not he the first to welcome what you offer, glad to hold in his right hand your gifts of fruit? Oh, but now he is not bent on what your trees may bear, nor does he care for garden herbs, however sweet their juice. What he pursues is you alone, and nothing else will do. Oh, have mercy, he is burning. Act as if the plea that you are hearing from my lips had come from his own self. Oh, do take care, remember, there are gods who punish all hard hearts. Oh, you know that Venus loathes such souls, and so does she whose shrine is in Rhamnuntes. Yes, Nemesis is one who won't forget her anger. Oh, and that you may duly fear the fruits of arrogance. My many years have taught me that lesson. I shall share an episode that all of Cyprus knows, a tale that may persuade your heart to feel more sympathetically, to bend, to yield. For young Iphis
had seen Anaxarete, and while she was from a noble family, he was from humble birth. Oh, he saw her once, but that was quite enough. Within his bones he felt the flame of love, and though he fought against its force, he could not overcome his frenzy. Reason lost, and so he went and stood before her door a suppliant. While there to her nurse the lovesick youth confessed his longing, pleading for benevolence. He prayed that even as the nurse held dear her charge, she would not be too harsh with him. And one by one he begged the many servants, whom he ingratiated, to support his cause. For often he consigned his words to waxen tablets, asking there to bear his pleas and prayers to her. Though at times he propped the garlands against her door, wreaths wet with tears. But she was even harsher than the sea that surges at the setting of the kids, harder than iron-forged furnaces of Noricus, or living rock that grips the spot where it has roots. And so she mocked her lover. With her axe, her words, she robbed poor Iphis of all hope. She was too proud, too cruel. Oh, that long torment was too much. And there before her door he said, "You've won now, Anaxarete. There's no need for you to be disturbed because of me. Prepare a joyful triumph, sing your songs of victory, and wear your gleaming crown of laurel. You have won indeed, and I die willingly. And you can take delight of that. You are made of iron. With that act, you will find something in my love at last to praise. My death will please you. You will grant some merit to me, but remember this. My love for you won't end until my life is ended, and at my death I lose 2 lights. And you will not hear news of my demise at second hand. No, it's I myself, yes, I, whom you will see before you as you die. I shall be visible. Your cruel eyes can feast upon my corpse. But you, O gods, if it be true that you watch mortal things, remember me. There is no plea my tongue can utter now. And to my fame, and all the time you've taken from my days." Well, that said, he lifted up his tearful eyes and pale arms to the door that time on time again he'd wreathed with garlands. Always he tied a rope around the highest beam, he cried, "No, ruthless woman, is this then the kind of wreath that pleases you?" And so he slipped his head into the noose, and doing so, he kept his head turned toward her room, for there he swayed with broken neck, a lifeless, wretched weight. His feet were dangling, twitching, and they struck her door, and with a sound that seemed to moan, it opened, and what had happened now was clear. The servants wailed and took the body down and bore it to his widowed mother's house. She clutched the cold corpse of her son, and then she spoke the words of grief that parents speak, and led the sorry mourners in their course through city streets. And Iphis's pallid corpse lay on the bier as it was carried towards the pier. The house of Anaxarete lay close to where the mourners had to pass, and so that cruel girl held their laments, the girl on whom a god now wrought revenge. At first uncertain, she then said, let's look at this sad funeral. For beneath the roof there was a room whose window opened wide, and as she leaned out that window, caught sight of Iphis on his bier. Her eyes, they grew rigid. Her body lost all its warm blood. She paled. Trying to step back, she could not budge. Nor could she turn her face aside, and soon her body was held fast by that same stone whose hardness had long since possessed her heart. And lest you think that I've invented this, on Cyprus, in the town of Salamis, the stony form of Anaxarete still stands a statue. Facing it there is a temple called the Shrine of Gazing Venus. Pomona, my dear nymph, just keep these things in mind and set aside your arrogance. Wed him who loves you, and in recompense, no late spring frost will nip your buds and fruits in bud. and headlong winds won't rip your blossoms off.
So did the god in old woman's guise plead with Pomona, getting no reply. At that, Vertumnus once again took on his true form. His masquerade was done. He showed Pomona all his splendor, young again, as when the radiant sun has won its war against the clouds, victorious, it shines with its unfettered light. Vertumnus stood ready now to take the nymph by force, but force was hardly needed, for his beauty entranced her, godly beauty. Now she, too, felt the same passion. Love had pierced her through. The story of Vertumnus and Pomona took place when Proca ruled Ausonia. And it was Numitor, who should have been Ausonia's next king, but his false brother Aumalius usurped his place as ruler. By force of arms he won the Latin scepter. Old Numitor did not regain the crown till Romulus and Remus, his grandsons, born of his daughter Ilia by Mars, came to his aid. And on the feast of Pallas, the shepherd's tutelary goddess, Rome was founded. Tatius and the Sabines launched their war against the city. It was then that traitorous Tarpeia showed the men of Tatius how to take the secret path into the citadel, and she, for this, was justly punished when that very force which she had helped repaid the girl with death. The Sabines crushed her under their heaped shields, and then, in silence, just like stealthy wolves, assailed the sleeping sentinels. They reached the gates that Romulus had bolted tight with sturdy bars. But Juno's own hand loosed one bar, and as the gate turned on the hinge, there was no sound. The only one to notice the fallen bar along the gate was Venus, and she'd have closed the gate again, but gods are not allowed to undo what was done by gods. So Venus had to call upon some naiads of Ausonia, whose home was near the shrine of Janus, in a grove well watered by a crystalline, cool spring. Those nymphs did not refuse what Venus asked. They let their fountains stream and gush, and yet the gates of Janus's shrine were still not blocked. That flood was not enough to shut the pass. And so into their stream's great flow they poured hot sulphur, and ignited with hot pitch the hollow channels where their waters coursed. By these and other means the blazing steam drove down into the fountain's deepest veins, and you, the spring that until then had vied with alpine cold, are able now to boast that you're a match for fire and fierce coals. Smoke rose from the two gate posts. In the shape the fountain now had taken, it delayed the sturdy Sabines. Though the gate was open, the Sabines could not pass. And so the Romans gained time enough to arm. When Romulus attacked, and desecrating swords had shed the mingled blood of sons-in-law and fathers-in-law, and corpses covered Roman soil, a truce seems best, an end to war, and yet one that did not depend on total slaughter. Peace was declared, and Tatius shared the crown. When Tatius died, the Romans and the Sabines shared one ruler, Romulus. Both tribes were treated equally. Mars laid aside his helmet. To the father of both gods and men he said, "O father, it is time. The power of Rome is firm. It does not hang upon the might of just one man. Then grant the prize you promised me and Ilia's son, your worthy grandson Romulus. It's come, the time to snatch him up from earth and set this Roman in the heavens. Once you said with all the gods in council, I recall your gracious words inscribed upon my soul, there will be one you'll bear to the gray blue of heaven. Well, let your promise now prove true." Jove nodded in assent, and he hid the sky with his encumbering clouds. He terrified the earth with thunder and with lightning bolts. Mars understood these signs of the Almighty. Now free to seize his son, he leaned upon his lance as lever, and with that added thrust he vaulted into his huge chariot. Then, wielding his resounding lash, he spurred his fearless horses under their cruel yoke. Descending through the air, Mars halted on the summit of the wooded Palatine. And there, where Romulus was governing the Romans as their rightful king, Mars seized his son. And as he bore that mortal form up through thin air, its human parts dissolved, just as a leaden ball that has been hurled from a great sling dissolves midway along its course across the sky. Now Romulus has gained a guise more fair. He is Quirinus, in his white toga trimmed with purple stripes. His form is worthy of the gods' high couches. His wife Hersilia was weeping for her Romulus. She thought that he had died. So Juno ordered Iris to descend along her arching rainbow to console the widow with these words: "O you, much prized by Latins and by Sabines, were the wife of one so great, and, now that he's divine, are still most worthy of him. Do not weep, and follow where I lead. If you would see your husband, I shall take you to that green grove on Quirinus's hill, the slope that shades the sanctuary of the Roman king." Iris obeyed, and gliding down to earth among her many-colored arts, she spoke to Queen Hersilia as she had been told. The widow, barely lifting up her eyes, and modestly replied, "No, goddess, I do not know who you are, but it is plain that you're a deity. Lead me to him. Let me see his dear face again. Oh, if fate allows me that alone, to see him once again and never more, I'll say I've gained the heavens as a gift." And at once she went with Thaumas's daughter to the Palatine, the hill of Romulus, and there a star from heaven glided down to earth, igniting Hersilia's hair. She and the star together ascended, rising through the upper air. In heaven, with familiar hands, the founder of Rome receives his wife, transforming both her body and her name. He calls her Hora. As goddess, she's Quirinus's wife once more.